Anyone who's seen the movie knows he gets on the plane, and it doesn't go well for their relationship, at least in the short term of the movie. We're going to begin today, as we begin each week. That's the first commandment. Thou shalt no gods before me. And the second commandment, have ye make no graven images, no idols. And the third commandment, don't take the Lord's name in vain. That's good. The first service, they just sat there dead silent. The fourth commandment,
Keep the Sabbath.
keep the Sabbath holy. The fifth commandment,
Honor your father and mother.
and the sixth commandment, thou shalt not murder. All right, you guys are getting there. I'm going to hear more voices next week. It's a little harder each week as we add another commandment. Today's commandment comes to us from Exodus. It's the seventh commandment, Exodus chapter 20, verse 14. You shall not commit adultery. You shall not commit adultery. It's one of those long, difficult ones. But today, we're going to start with a story. I was reading about a mom who had a preschool daughter, and she was teaching her preschool daughter about God. And she decided one of the best spots to start is teaching her daughter the 10 Commandments. So they're going through the commandments, and she gets to, thou shalt not commit adultery. Her little daughter looks at her and says, Mom, what's adultery? The mom panics and thinks, what am I going to tell her? I can't come up with anything. How do I explain this to my preschool daughter? And all of a sudden the daughter looks at her and says, oh, I know. You shouldn't cut down an adult tree. So there you have it. Only cut juvenile trees. You can go home now. We're done. Got this one covered. Anyone cut an adult tree down? No? We're good. Unfortunately, that's not the topic of today's sermon. And today's sermon was actually fairly difficult to put together without saying anything political in today's political environment. I mean, we have one political candidate who has admitted in his memoirs to having at least 2 extramarital affairs in his first and second marriage. He had affairs and then ended up marrying the women he had affairs with to become his second and third wives. Not always a great role model. On the other side, we have someone whose husband has had multiple affairs. Some he's only admitted to under oath. And she has stayed with him, sometimes even tending to blame the women for her husband's affairs. And so both sides don't exactly give us the best role models to hold up to our children, to hold up to our nation when we're talking about something like adultery. But it shows where we've come as a society. That adultery is now something that is accepted, and it doesn't really have that big a problem anymore. Up until it just went bankrupt, Ashley Madison was advertising on television. Ashley Madison was in all the major magazines. You can see ads in Sports Illustrated, in People, and in Time for Ashley Madison. Now, for those of you who don't know, Ashley Madison was a dating website specifically for married people who wanted to have affairs. And it was one of the most successful dating websites until it just came out that there was like 10 million men and 6 women on the website. But God offers us a different way of looking at things than the way our society today tends to look at it. God says, adultery, we're against it. If you take nothing else away from the sermon, just remember, adultery, we're against it. You'll be doing well. But when we think about this command, much like thou shalt not murder, it seems fairly easy and simple. You say, I haven't committed adultery. I haven't had an affair in at least a year, and so I'm doing good. But then we come to the New Testament, and we encounter Jesus. And as usual, Jesus has this tendency to just really make things harder, kind of mess things up for us sometimes. When we're feeling good about ourselves and thinking, I've got this taken care of, Jesus comes. And as he's preaching in the Sermon on the Mount, in Matthew chapter 5, verse 27, you have heard that it was said, you shall not commit adultery. But I say to you also, that everyone who looks at a woman lustfully has already committed adultery with her in his heart. If your right eye causes you to sin, pluck it out and throw it away. It is better that you lose one of your members than that your whole body be thrown into hell. So Jesus makes it a little bit tougher here on us, because if you just look at someone with lust in your heart, you've committed adultery. Now, how many married people here can honestly say that they have never looked at another woman or another man and said, she's beautiful, he's really handsome? Okay. See, I changed the question. Last time I asked who has done it, and only like 3 people raised their hand. This time I asked who hasn't done it, and nobody raised their hand. Let's see how many marital arguments we have. My phone will be ringing off the hook. Pastor, my husband looks at other women. He didn't raise his hand to say no. But it's true. All of us human beings have a tendency to look around. So why don't we see lots of one-eyed Christians? Fortunately, Jesus uses a little bit of hyperbole here, but he makes an important point. You've all heard the saying, just because you're on a diet doesn't mean you can't look at the menu, right? Anyone heard that before? Somebody likes it over there. Okay. Just because you're on a diet doesn't mean you can't look at the menu. No! When you're on a diet, you don't look at the menu. That's what it means to be on a diet. If you want to lose weight, if you want to stay on your diet, you don't look at the menu. And if you look at the menu, you're going to get tempted. And as you get tempted, you're going to start thinking about the other opportunities. And you're going to think about how good that bacon cheeseburger would taste. And pretty soon, I guarantee, if you keep looking at the menu, you're going to be off your diet. It's going to happen every time. If you're on a diet, you don't look at the menu. You don't put yourself in the place of temptation. And it's hard nowadays to avoid temptation. It's really getting a lot worse with pornography and other forms of temptation. Because society is telling us more and more that it's okay. It's okay to be around this temptation. And even if you don't think it's okay to be around this temptation, it sneaks into our houses all over the place. It used to be that if you wanted to look at pornography, you had to go to some seedy store somewhere, and then pray no one drove by and saw your car in the parking lot. Now, you just go into a quiet corner of your bedroom, pop open your laptop, and the whole world is at your fingertips. And sometimes even when you're not trying, the whole world pops up. I had a sermon that I was doing at another church, and for the children's moment, to tie into the sermon, I wanted to use pictures of Disney princesses. And my youth pastor, who was putting that together for me, came into my office and said, Pastor, don't ever look up Disney princesses without safe search on Google. It's pretty bad. The things that are coming, that our children are seeing, that people are seeing. And when Jesus says, look, just looking with lust in your heart is the same. It's because Jesus understands that when we put ourselves in the place of temptation, pretty soon temptation becomes desire, and then desire becomes action. And the more temptation we allow into our lives, the less satisfied we are with what we have. Now, God made us in His image. And being made in the image of a Trinity means we are made in the image of a God who is in perfect relationship. In fact, relationship, 3 in 1, perfect relationship, is the identity of our God. And so we are made to be in relationships. And God gives us the marriage covenant as our most intimate and deepest relationship. It's the place where we really discover what it means to be in a relationship. It's a place where we find acceptance, where we can grow together with someone to help us growing. It's a place where we find compassion and caring and really begin to understand what love is. But if we allow outside temptations to begin coming in, we begin to break apart that relationship, that intimate, special, deep relationship. You begin allowing comparisons in. My wife is not as gorgeous as that airbrush. And when you begin to do that, you begin to destroy that most special thing that God has allowed in, that God has created for you. And when we begin to destroy the marriage relationship, what we discover is families begin to come apart. Society begins to unravel. Because the marriage is the basis of the family. And the family is the basis of all society. So God gives us this commandment, saying, you be faithful in this most important relationship. And your family will grow. Your life will grow as you experience the depth of love that I have for you and want for you. Now some people will say, but when we first got married, when I first was dating, I had these warm and fuzzy butterflies every time she walked through the door. Every time he came home from work, oh, it just felt like rainbows were blossoming. And I don't have those rainbows and butterflies anymore. Well, marriage goes through ups and downs. But those rainbows and butterflies, that's not love. That's lust. That's a chemical hormonal reaction that goes away over time. But love is that deep, intimate connection, that building a life together, that trust and caring. And love only grows deeper and better until you begin to allow temptations to come in. Jesus knows that. And so he warns against allowing those temptations to come in, to destroy that relationship, which will then destroy society. Jesus gives us an image of the family together, focused on one another in deep love. Now, I understand, since no one raised their hand, you all understand too, that there will be occasions when you look at a woman and you say, she's really attractive. You look at a man and say, he's really handsome. Everyone does that. I've even commented to Virginia, oh, I think she's attractive. What Jesus is saying is not that you will never see another person and say that they're attractive. What Jesus is saying is you don't allow your mind to linger. You don't allow your mind to wander. You don't allow your mind to wonder. You begin immediately putting that thought out of your mind. You do not allow temptation in. Because as soon as you allow temptation in, temptation begins to grow. And it doesn't happen all at once. Nobody sets out, nobody when they get married, actually, most people now, California and a few other states have something called starter marriages that automatically dissolve after a certain amount of time. But then you have the option to re-up and keep it. But most people don't go into marriage with the intention of, I'm going to have an affair in a couple of years. Most people go into marriage committed. But temptation sneaks in slowly and begins to grow and build. So Jesus says we push it aside completely and don't let it in. Marriage is a relationship that requires commitment, total commitment. I told the story last week to some people that when Hernando Cortez arrived in Mexico to conquer the Aztec Empire, he had a group of about 600 Spaniards land on the coast. Now there are thousands of Aztec warriors who will soon be lined up against him. And Cortez knows there will be a temptation when you see what's there to turn and run, to flee, to go back to someplace else. And so the first thing Cortez does when he lands on the coast of Mexico and they unload the ships is he has all of the ships burned. So there is no way out. And that's what marriage requires. That kind of commitment. That kind of commitment where you don't allow yourself to think about what if, maybe, possibly. God gives you this relationship. And through better and worse, and unfortunately, if you're newlywed, there will be better and worse. If you've been married for any amount of time, you know there's better and worse. But unfortunately, it means you're married to a human being. Being married to a human being means there's better and worse. But over time, as that relationship God gave you grows deeper, the better gets better, and the worse gets a little bit less. This relationship is so intimate and so deep and so central to society that when the prophets, Jeremiah, Hosea, and others are looking for an analogy to describe human beings' relationship with God, they describe human beings being unfaithful as adultery. They condemn Israel as an adulterous people because they've abandoned God. Because the relationship with God is based on a covenant that God creates with humanity. And it demands faithfulness to that covenant. And those are the same words we use to describe the marriage covenant. Now, I think one of the problems we have today, and if there's any lawyers here, I'm not a lawyer, so I'm going to give you that disclaimer, is that if you read literature about marriage from 100 years ago, it talks frequently about the marriage covenant. Now when you read literature about marriage, it talks frequently about the marital contract. And I think that's a significant difference. That we've switched from thinking of marriage as a covenant to thinking of it as a contract. In a covenant is something that stands eternal, blessed by God. Even if one side breaks the covenant still stands. And there is forgiveness and renewal in a covenant. A contract stands only as long as it benefits both sides. A contract has an ending, and a contract can be broken. And if it's broken, yes, one side may pay a penalty or suffer some consequences, but it can be broken, and we all understand that contracts can be broken. And I think that language says something today about the way we think of marriage. That we've switched from a covenant to a contract. And we all know that children grow better, loved within a loving marriage, with two role models. People grow better with someone to help them grow, to care about them. And God gives us this. I've never been able to understand how pastors could ever have an affair. Because, I mean, I guess I understand. I mean, as you put yourself in a place of temptation, eventually the temptation is going to overwhelm you. But I have spent so many hours over the course of my career sitting in my office with couples where one has been unfaithful and the other has just discovered this. And you see both people in your office, the person who had the affair, who obviously wasn't thinking about his marriage at the time, is now just incredibly wrought with pain and anguish. And they are suffering as they see their family torn apart, as they see someone who they care about in their spouse who is hurting so deeply that they usually can't even express the depth of the pain. And then the person who was cheated on has this loss of trust and faith that cuts them to their very core. And when you see what infidelity does in a marriage, what it does to lives, how it tears families apart and it scars children for years and decades to come, and you sit with these people and you see the pain and the suffering on them, you think, how could anyone do this? What could be worth this kind of suffering? But God understands temptation. And God understands that we human beings can fall to temptation. And that temptation is something that grows over time. And so Jesus says, if you even look, you're guilty. Because you need to stay away from temptation. You need to stay away from things that will drag you down the wrong way. And even in the Bible, when they talk about people who aren't married, so people who are completely single, they say don't do it. Because when you eventually get into this relationship, this marriage covenant, you're going to be bringing all of that past experience with you. And it's going to make trust harder. It's going to make faithfulness harder. It's going to create doubts and wonders. And you don't want to do that in a marriage covenant. This sacred, special bond that God gave us to build families upon, to build societies upon. And I know, outside, the world is getting more and more okay with this all the time, as we see from things like Ashley Madison. But we have an obligation as the church to show a different, better way. It's scary that the church's divorce rate is as high as the rate of regular society. You'd think we would be better. The pastors have known for a long time that churches' religious development is only as good as their role models. Society's moral development is only as good as its role models. And so we need to think about what kind of role models we are for our children. What kind of role models we allow around our children as we bring up the next generation to understand what faithfulness and commitment are in a marriage covenant. Rick Santorum, the senator from Pennsylvania, told a story during an election rally like 12 years ago. And he was about a young pastor who had a dream that he really wanted to be president of a small Bible college. He felt that's what God wanted him to do. And he desperately wanted to run a small Bible college. And so he, part-time while he was preaching, he went to school and earned a PhD. And began to teach part-time while he preached. Eventually, he goes to work at a small Bible college full-time on the faculty, teaching. And moves his way up to eventually he gets appointed as president of the small Bible college. He has lived out this dream, this calling he's felt that God has had for him for 40 years. Fortunately, right as he gets appointed, his wife is diagnosed with Alzheimer's. A short time into his time at the school, his wife's Alzheimer's is progressing rapidly. And he realizes he can't care for her full time and live out his dream of being the president of this small Bible college. His friends tell him, well, just put her in a home somewhere. She doesn't know who you are. And as he turns in his resignation to the Bible college, he says, she may not know who I am, but I know who she is. And we made a covenant to care for one another, through better or worse. And I have to care for her, because that's what my covenant is. God gives us marriage. To have someone to care for, to have someone to love, to be there. A relationship like no other. A relationship so special that we base all of families and all of society upon it. And God says, don't allow any temptation in this relationship. Because this relationship is sacred, and it's also fragile. Care for it. And you will be so richly blessed throughout your life to have someone to love you, to care for you, to grow with you, Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit.